He's not off the discussion table.
Exactly.
So, if you're following some of the extraordinary events in Silicon Valley recently, you will have heard that the multi-billionaire Peter Thiel has been doing a lecture series broadly on Christianity, but more specifically on the Antichrist, which was, made people shudder a little bit. How could any wealthy, influential person in Silicon Valley bring up such a topic? Now, if you know Peter Thiel, he's a big backer of the Republican Party. He made that clear. He's spoken at their conferences, and he's a professed Christian. He goes to Bible study classes, but his thinking on the Antichrist got so much buzz that the Wall Street Journal picked up on it, because this his whole topic has been circulating in a lot of interesting circles. Peter Thiel, a billionaire investor in data, AI, defense, and weapons development technology companies, wants everyone to think more about the end of the world, according to the Wall Street Journal. In a lecture series recently, he encouraged an audience to continue working towards scientific progress, whether in artificial intelligence or other forms of technology. I'm reading from the Wall Street Journal. Fear or regulating it or oppressing technological progress, wait for this, would hasten the coming of the Antichrist, Creel said, according to people who attended his lecture. A devout Christian, Thiel is expanding on a number of speeches and public interviews he is giving about the Antichrist in a closed 4-part lecture series. He basically says existential risks in today's world could present themselves in the form of nuclear war, environmental disaster, dangerously engineered bioweapons, and even autonomous killer robots guided by AI. As humans race towards a last battle, the so-called Armageddon, a one-world government will form, promising peace and safety. And it kind of coalesces with the maybe the evangelical or popular notion of the Antichrist, but he thinks it could be a person. I think he's more thinks of it as a system, actually. But he asks his listeners not to lose heart, because the idea is to be, I suppose, prepared and to look to the Christian faith for all the answers. I wanted to start with that because I think it's kind of interesting. As we know, and we brought it up on the last show, there's an AI arms race. There's trillions anticipated to be spent. There's already billions and trillions already spent. We've data centers going up left, right, and center across America. There's fears of an AI bubble. Some people discount that because they're starting to see some productivity gains, but a lot of the stocks in AI, by many measures, are way overvalued. So we're just going to have to wait.
Right.
I want to parallel quickly, and I don't want to make this a religious show per se. Our new Pope, Pope Leo, took his name or imitated the name of the first Pope Leo, who in the late 19th century, this Catholic Pope, published a fascinating encyclical called Rerum Novarum, which means of new things. And back then we were in the throes of the Second Industrial Revolution, and it impacted Italy in an extraordinary way. Poor people, let's call them peasants, were moving in from the countryside, taking up jobs in the new factories. Conditions, as we've learned from historical records, were appalling. So he wrote it in response to a lot of different movements. The idea that capitalism or the free enterprise system could be threatened, workers were being threatened, private property in particular could be threatened, and obviously the fear of the rise of capital or of communism, a communist threat. So he wove all his thinking into this, defending the rights of workers, defending the rights of capital, and condemning socialism and upholding the idea of private property. Now, in our last show, I think one of you, Kevin, Brian, one of you asked me about AI and where it was going with income inequality. And I did note that I'm pro-free enterprise. I'm not a socialist, but it seems we're on a trajectory to massive widening income inequality. We see that already in America. We see the rank of billionaires, millionaires growing, and there's a big chasm in between among the middle classes.
For sure, yeah.
So in fact, it's so bad that home ownership is just a pipe dream for a lot of young middle-class Americans. And you read there in the past couple of days that President Trump is floating the idea of a 50-year mortgage. A 50-year mortgage, oh my God. So they are some of the trends: debt, race, and AI technology. The Dow Jones, S&P hitting new records. The economy, by some measures, performing great, but we've had a government shutdown. And we're also seeing a lot of layoffs across a lot of sectors.
Oh, yeah.
Amazon, Target has laid off a lot of people. All the big firms are talking about layoff, especially at the corporate level, where a lot of it's impacted. We're told, we don't know for sure, but we're told a lot of it's impacted by the AI processes taking over, jobs that were previously done by humans.
Right. I had heard something previously that Amazon let go about 12,000. I'm not sure what type of workers. They might have been middle management or some kind of mid-level, but I read that the 12,000 people from Amazon were let go recently. So that's pretty significant.
Yeah, it is. And IBM plans to eliminate thousands of jobs by the end of the year. That's very significant, obviously, as well. So we'll see where it goes, and we'll see how fast these data centers can be built to supply the new energy needs. That's a big that's heavy in the news. And we'll see that is that ultimately part and parcel, of this AI bubble, which we hope never happens, but a lot of people think it's headed to a bubble, and then there'll be a big shake-up, and then a lot of investors and other companies will pick up all these assets at fire sale prices. It's the way it happened with the dot-com bubble. The railroad building mania at the end of the 19th century. Various booms and busts. We've seen it repeated over and over, especially in an intensely capitalist economy like America.
Yeah, I think with AI, just from what I'm seeing, a lot of companies, they're putting a lot of stock into it and they think it can replace humans, but they're going to find out to the contrary. Can it increase the productivity? Yes, but outright replacing humans, that's a whole different issue. And a lot of companies that are having these fire sale layoffs, they're going to realize really quickly that they made a huge mistake. Especially you need someone to understand these systems that AI is building and to be able to verify it. And if you're firing somebody who's been in a company for 10 years and now he's no longer there, you're firing people that understand the system and what it's supposed to do. So I think it's going to be a huge issue coming up soon with these companies who are just slashing all of their workforce to replace them with AI.
I think, and then another issue that's been brought up, I think in another article I read, Kev, I think you might have sent me this, is that companies are taking AI and they're replacing junior developers. So junior software developers, web developers are being replaced by cheaper AI models. Maybe they cost $5,000, maybe they cost $10,000. I'm not really sure, but just reading about and hearing about, okay, we're getting rid of the junior talent. Well, the problem with that is that if you get rid of all the juniors, who do you train to become the seniors? Because if there's no juniors, then all the seniors retire. Then what do you do?
Yeah.
think it's a big issue of these companies buying into the marketing hype. Like, okay, you have this thing that can, instead of paying this guy 100K salary, you could do it for, whatever you're paying for the subscription. But, it's short sighted.
Well, AI has created efficiencies on Wall Street. And Wall Street is plowing a lot of money into new technologies. It always has. It has to keep upgrading, AI-related technologies. I think JP Morgan said next year they're going to spend at least 19 billion on more AI-focused technologies, but that excludes other massive investments way beyond that 18, 19 billion. But like elementary, well, they're not elementary, but IPO filings can now be more automated because of AI. You have AI devices to scan prospectuses and documents, which junior staffers would have done. Even though your point is good, juniors are needed too, just to track certain crystal information that might be needed to gain an advantage. And a lot of the hedge funds and the trading firms will tell you that they're using AI, but at the end of a lot of their decision making, a human is the best person to make the final decision, because the inputs into the AI is only as good as the person who is initiating that. So they're still using a lot of they're still using human traders, even on these quant desks, to make final decisions involving multi-million-dollar trades.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't know if you know, recently the investor Michael Burry, who predicted the subprime crash, recently took out two short positions, or shorted two stocks. Signs of an artificial intelligence bubble abound. Stock valuations have become uncomfortably rich. AI-related debt is ballooning, and a sustainable financial model for the technology has largely yet to emerge. Now, Michael Burry, the investor who famously predicted the subprime mortgage bubble bursting two decades ago, is betting that two stocks at the heart of the artificial intelligence trade are set for a fall. And he cited, he has actually taken the bets involved. He's involved with bets of 900 million of Palantir shares and 200 million of Nvidia shares at current prices. So he's got a lot of things wrong as well. I mean, he's kind of celebrated as a hero for anticipating the subprime crisis, but he made other bets after that never panned out, and a lot of other analysts could have seen the housing crisis. I think it was predictable to a lot of people, but I guess he nailed it on the subprime. And I think what he saw was the interconnection and all the financialization of the mortgage market. He saw that as as problematic, and he also realized eventually that a lot of mortgages were being issued to customers who really didn't have any credit. They did terribly low score.
Right, like no chance of paying it back, but
no,
they were given loans anyways. And I guess a guy like that, he saw that and knew how to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and he followed the money trail, because what a lot of the mortgage companies did, they sold off those mortgage to second and third parties, and so there's a whole daisy chain, which is a weird thing in the last 10 or 15 years on Wall Street. They call it the financialization of Wall Street. Like, there's multiple layers of paper behind a lot of instruments. It's not only held maybe by a JP Morgan, but it could be sold off to another institution. It's like insurance and reinsurance. So when there's a problem, and a debt problem unfolds, it's a massive cascading effect, which can have global implications, as we saw at the time of the Lehman crisis.
Right.
Yeah, it's like a lot of financial magic, quote unquote, to cover up the reality. But we can't necessarily predict the time frame. But I feel like the writing is on the wall. Okay, like AI, it's inevitable that's going to be a bubble because of it's replacing everybody who's going to have money to buy the outputs of whatever they're creating.
That's a good point you raised, because there was an analyst made something similar with all the layoffs, which seem to be escalating. It's going to have a deflationary impact on our economy. Like, people worry about the current 3% and, Trump getting involved with the Fed and jawboning them to keep lowering rates. It might be a moot point eventually, because with all these layoffs, there'll be less money to spend. The consumers will have less money to spend.
Just in general, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Consumer confidence would definitely be impacted, which will, even if people did have the money to spend just because they have a negative view on the economy, the future prospects, they're going to hold on to that money. So if they're not spending, companies aren't making money, and it's all going to kind of collapse in on itself. I can't predict the exact time frame, but I think it's inevitable.
You got to figure like a lot of people are probably buying gold and silver at this point.
Yeah, well, we spoke about this on the last episode, and we got into the idea of the US being having the US dollar being the reserve currency, the biggest game in town, as it were. We can use that to do 60, 70%, by some measures, 90% of our transactions worldwide. But according to some analysts, a lot of the central banks outside America are now stocking up in gold, so that gold is becoming the new reserve, and they're dumping a lot of their dollars. And it kind of explains Donald Trump's rush to shore up the US economy with, he's talking about $17 trillion investment. That to me is kind of hard to believe, but he's certainly encouraging billions, if not trillions, of investment by reshoring a lot of these companies. So, yeah, that's a big issue. We got to preserve our currency status. Otherwise, it's going to be a different kind of Armageddon than the one that Thiel is talking about. Ray Dalio, if you're familiar with him, he's a big debt analyst. He manages a massive amount of money out of Connecticut. He was quoted today, and he's never said this, that he thinks this current or debt crisis in the US, I guess it wasn't nuanced, but I presume he meant if it's not corrected, we could hit the cliff. We could go over the cliff in about in 3 years. He gave it 3 years. Because you asked me, when could we have a problem? Like, we're careening towards 37, 38, 40 trillion. If it keeps going in that direction, he's saying 3 years at most. I hope he's wrong. I hope.
I mean, it seems like it's already a problem, and when we talk about AI, people say, oh, AI is coming. It's already here. It's already replacing jobs. Just look around you. Look on LinkedIn. Go to your LinkedIn feed, Facebook feed, Twitter. Everyone's getting laid off right now. So it's it looks pretty bleak to me.
Well, there's a lot. These career columnists can be sometimes taken with a pinch of salt, but a lot of them now are clearly, and for obvious reasons, addressing the AI phenomena, and they're featuring pieces about how to make yourself useful in the age of AI. Be a kind of a go-to person. I know ChatGPT and generative AI is the buzz, and you can sort of hone your skills there. But the very sharp professionals have managed to carve out a niche for themselves by making them a go-to person in AI, maybe how to use the prompts better, and how to refine the text they send back. But net, the amount of jobs or losses from AI are huge. No question.
And like, if nobody had the jobs, then they're talking about moving to this universal basic income. But I feel like where they're going to get the money to pay that? Like, if companies don't want to pay workers for being productive, then why would they want to pay people for doing nothing?
That's a great
Well,
question.
Well, we don't want a communist takeover as maybe threatened in New York City with the new mayor elect. We'll see. He might have to swallow a lot of his promises. But the universal basic income concept has been touted. We spoke about this, of course, in the last episode. There's a lot of negatives to that, because then, if everybody's guaranteed some kind of a basic income, and there's no carrot and stick, well, you know what? Maybe they just stay home and do nothing productive in their lives. On the other hand,
Just watch Netflix all day.
I think it was Milton Friedman, funnily enough, spoke in favor of a universal basic income, but only in a strategic sense. And other conservative commentators have said, yeah, use it for useful purposes. Let parents choose, have school choice, rather than, putting the taxes into failing public schools, put it into up and coming charter schools, and give them a kind of a form of universal basic income, so they can pick and choose what schools to pick for their kids. That to me would be a good use of government resources. We'll have to see. But if the income inequality widens, there's going to be extraordinary and fierce pressure to do something for the middle class who are being hollowed out. Can't. I mean, that's it. That's what this election in New York City with Mandami was really about, as you know. And in New Jersey, he won it, surprisingly, but he only got 50% of the vote, less than 50. I think Cuomo got 40 something, and the other candidate only got under 7-8%. Was about affordability. So it was an interesting and telling sign of our times.
I think one of the problems is, their philosophy is that we're going to give people free stuff by taxing the rich, but you can only do that if only you can trap the rich into that that state or that city, because once the taxes start going higher and higher, most of the rich are just going to up and leave. Like, a lot of companies and rich people, I know they're leaving New York for coming to the South. I believe in Dallas they're creating a stock exchange out here. So
Oh, wow. And like also you have a lot of really wealthy people moving out of the country, moving to places like, let's say, Costa Rica, Brazil, New Zealand, Australia, maybe Europe. But the fact is, here they're leaving. They're leaving, or they're moving their money, which is kind of the same thing. So it's going to be interesting to see like how it actually does roll out, how it does play out.
I just came back from Costa Rica. I was there with my wife. We had a splendid time, amazing. And I did notice the presence of a lot of Americans who've basically spent half the year there, or maybe 9 months of the year. I guess there's some, I don't know what their arrangements are in particular. It's actually pushing up the cost of housing. Because, and then locals are kind of priced out of the market. That's kind of the downside of it, because it's not basically a wealthy country. It's a lot of infrastructure problems, but you're correct. A lot of Americans are going there. So another interesting area is Nashville is trying to lure Americans, rich New Yorkers. I know at the time of COVID, a lot of rich New Yorkers went down to Miami And when
Yes.
taxes were just getting out of control, a lot of them were saying, this is it, throwing their hands up in the air. We can't take any more of these surcharges, high real estate
Right.
costs. It just went down to Florida. It was totally crazy. But again, everything is all about affordability. And I just want to make another little comment. I was shocked by the margins in some of the recent elections, especially in New Jersey, where Mikey Sherrill won by a thumping 13% lead over her opponent, Chitterelli. I can't pronounce his name. I butchered it, I know, but he was the Republican. And nobody saw that coming, despite all the polling, seemed to be anticipating a very narrow lead, 2%, 3%. And I think, and then in New York City, of course, we had 50, and then we had Curtis Leah, and then Como. They picked up the other 50%. But some political scientists have looked at this as a very deep and dark warning sign that the voters are distracted and fed up, and are throwing their hands up at the political system. They've given up on politicians. And some polling has showed that 60, 70, 80% of American voters have no confidence in the political system. That's a dangerous number, because I thought it was a swing. I thought there was some kind of a swing going on, and I'm hoping that it swings in the direction of pro-market, pro-free enterprise, pro-family value kind of candidates, pro, business and so on, and pro-enterprise and pro-law and order and all of those things. Now I'm not actually kind of sure. I'm kind of worried. I think if it's just about affordability and you have 50% of New Yorkers vote for somebody who has been described by some critics as a communist, with communist credentials, I think we kind of got to worry a bit here.
And I would like to mention, you think about most young people, are they voting? I don't think so. For the same reason you mentioned, people are getting, they're getting disenchanted, just getting a bad taste in their mouth about U.S. politics, and they see the left and the right as the same thing, money versus money, and they're not wrong, but it's the whole thing's a mess.
Yeah, well, on that, there was a record turnout for the mayoral elections in New York City, highest in decades. So a lot of those were young people and millennials. They just want, they drank the Kool-Aid, free everything, free this thing, free that, with no honest conception of how the financial system works. And I think we had a lot of that phenomena working in New Jersey as well. This is pretty explosive stuff. I mean, the Nazis tried to destroy the, international monetary system and create their own. They started off creating bonds, in the 1930s to create, their own currency, mono bonds or whatever they called it. And then they, when that caught up with them, they started to confiscate everything throughout Europe, oil paintings, properties. They did despicable things to our Jewish brothers and sisters, try to confiscate their property, made them, scapegoats. And we saw where all that ended. So if we don't respect property and suck up a little bit of pain and get our debt levels down, yeah, I think there's, I think that creates a dynamic that we don't want to face up to.
I think we're in a really weird position too. Like even Donald Trump, didn't the government just recently buy about 10% of Intel? So
Yeah,
he's supposedly free market, but now that's government ownership of that private institution. So I believe that's fascism, where government and corporation go hand in hand.
yes, yes. State capitalism, state socialism. Not a good intervention. It sets up and puts us on a slippery slope.
Yeah, I think that's why like so many young people are getting disenchanted. They feel like they don't have any real choice. Like these can't be the best candidates, and it's like no matter who you vote, it still feels like inflation is flying away and the rich are getting richer. We're still going to war. So, and I think my other concern with voting now is with AI, and especially social media. Most people consume news via social media, the younger generation. With AI, you can massage their thoughts by, the AI is recommending certain videos. So let's just say China, TikTok was Chinese owned. I don't know if they were forced to sell it yet, but who's to say that their algorithm isn't pushing pro, socialist, pro communist rhetoric, and this is what influences the younger generation to vote that way.
And you got that whole situation with Facebook or Meta, Cambridge Analytica scandal. There's actually a documentary about it on Netflix. It's called The Great Hack. I don't know if you guys out there have seen it, but it's about this pretty much data science company called Cambridge Analytica. And they're literally pushing the needle on, does something get voted yes? Does something get voted no? They push for Brexit happening. I mean, you guys can look into this if you don't believe me, but I think it may have something to do with Facebook changing their name, because they did not and do not want to be associated with Cambridge Analytica.
Well, on the same plane, we also had the so-called Steele dossier on again, not defense of Trump, by the way. The guy has some issues I can pick apart, but he got a very bad rap with that dossier. That was a fabricated document, as we know. It came out, Russian collusion, hanging, cavorting with prostitutes in Russia, all kinds of skullduggery, and he was paid supposedly by the Democratic Party, directly or indirectly, to produce that and to discredit Donald Trump. Soon after that came out, I was actually sent a copy of a publication on the Steele dossier. It was basically a reprint of the dossier by somebody who'd retired as a producer at a very big network. He worked in New York City. He worked with a really big TV network. He's a great guy. But he said to me, he sent me the book to read, and thinking that I would be influenced. I read through it and I said, there's more holes in this than Swiss cheese, I said. I mean, it was totally unbelievable. And people were swallowing up this hole. It was like a James Bond satire gone wrong almost. So we're dealing with this kind of really bizarre, strange propaganda.
And now with AI propaganda, it doesn't even necessarily have to be real. They can just use AI to generate it. Like a lot of this AI footage, it looks so realistic you can't tell it apart. So imagine that they're just generating footage of our politicians doing something that they never do. But if they're able to convince the public, because I think that's all that matters, the public believes it. If the public believes it, then essentially you're able to influence these elections. So,
which is why a lot of the, I've worked and done a lot of reporting for the New York Post, as you know, over the years. So I've been privileged to have met a lot of interesting people from all sides of the economic spectrum, a lot of wealthy people, a lot of poor people in between. Just gives you a lot of intimate knowledge of how their thinking works. And one thing I learned was that quite a few of these, the very, very wealthy people, have their own private research firms to get real intelligence and knowledge of what's happening on the street, similar to how a lot of the parties will do internal polling coming up to election time, and will use that polling to give them a guide on how they're doing, underperforming or overperforming, because the public polls have been wrong, and sometimes notoriously wrong. Sometimes they've been right, but the point I'm making is that with all the noise and buzz out there, including, the misinformation on social media, you need to verify independently much more than you had in the past.
Yep. With AI, it's going to allow bots to quickly spread information. You can generate stories. It's- So I think, yeah, verifiability, that's going to be extremely important. And I feel like, I believe they're moving. This is why they're proposing the blockchain, like where every online transaction is essentially recorded. But then the problem with that is you give up your security. So it's almost like we're being forced into authoritarian, like a digital authoritarian government. So, in Britain, they recently talked about the digital ID. And if you don't
That got
get it,
shut down by a lot of people.
Yeah, and they're trying it in other places too.
I'm curious also about, we spoke briefly about it in the last episode, outsourcing and what Donald Trump is trying to do, reshoring a lot of the jobs. Some of it, the reasons for that to involve national security. And I didn't share this story with you last time, but it occurred to me afterwards. Just at the outset of the COVID shutdown, um, I got a message from a mortgage banker in the United States, and he was alarmed. He said to me, John, he said, something terrible has happened. I'm in the middle of completing a lot of mortgage deals, but the back office processing has been frozen in India because a lot of the bank was using a lot of back office technologists to do the final print ups, documents, processing, whatever they do, and then to move the funds and approval. And they do good work. I think Indian workforce is next to none. It's superb, really. But
Yeah,
uh, the upshot was I investigated it, and what I understand happened was um, COVID effect was a worldwide global phenomena. A lot of the back offices in India were in relatively remote areas. So, and some of them obviously in urban centers, but in this particular instance, the processing um, happened in an area where the workers were forced to essentially abandon ship and they had to move back home. So there was nobody working, at their offices. I don't know if it affected a lot of people, but it certainly affected, a section of workers. So what happened was this bank, it interfered and interrupted the processing of these mortgage deals, and this went on for quite a considerable time. And then we ran the story in the New York Post. Not sure if it was connected, but he reached out to me soon after, says he got the funds were freed up, but he never went through such a nightmare in his life. The bigger point I'm trying to make is I've always felt outsourcing has some financial upside to some players, but the big downside is that if you had national security, times of war, times of breakdown, political upheaval, and you're dependent on overseas service providers to do all your work. That's kind of a scary thinking.
right.
I'd
yeah,
rather feel it was being done on home ground where we had kind of a unified economic and political system where you could find people, touch them, and so on.
yeah, most of our biggest tech companies, a lot of the CEOs are Indian. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you just think from a, like you mentioned, security standpoint, um, that's a huge risk. Let's just say we get in a war with India for whatever reason, or some huge economic dispute, and they all leave and go back home. And when a lot of these CEOs, high level technologists, they're all leaving. They're able to take all that knowledge with them, and now there's a huge gap. There's at least a decade or two of Americans who are not even able to learn a lot of these technologies, and where we're going to be behind. And yeah, it's extremely dangerous. Like, what does America even produce anymore? We don't have manufacturing. Most of the technology is outsourced. Like, And now you with BRICS, the petrodollar, that's about to go belly up. So just from just a realistic analysis, there's no real competence of America. China has the manufacturing, India has the technology. Like, what is America doing now?
Right. I guess we make soy, make a lot of
Yeah.
soy, and probably a lot of corn. But yeah, I mean, turn over anything, grab anything in your house right now. Do you think it says made in the USA? Probably not. So that's very telling of where we are as a nation. We don't really make anything here. We're just this, huge financial hub, and everyone, looks up at us like, oh, they have all the money and da 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 da. But I think it seems to me like things are slowly imploding, and there's going to have to be another bailout like there was years ago. And we remember how that went. The CEOs got the money, they took bonuses, they went on trips, and the American people are sitting there like, well, what the hell is going on?
Yeah. Well, that's Donald Trump's manifesto to reshore these jobs. And again, I'm not knocking or condemning these hardworking Indian employees, whether they're in the US as CEOs or in the back offices in India itself, processing documents for US firms. I mentioned that example earlier, where everything shut down and they couldn't process the mortgages for quite a while. Um, but Trump claims that we've trillions coming in. I've yet to see it, and it takes there's a lot of shovel-ready projects out there apparently, but I don't think the overall count of manufacturing jobs are up, or they're pretty much at the same levels they would have been 6 months ago or a year ago. So uh, we'll see.
And can I even really move those back? Because I know a lot of the manufacturing jobs are going to be they're replacing humans with robots. Even
Mhm.
Amazon is not manufacturing, but the warehouse, they're using more and more robots. So we bring them back. But if the entire factory or entire warehouse is staffed with robots, the only thing that's going to happen is the stockholders, the rich, the CEOs or whatever, they're going to get richer and people are still going to be unemployed. So
And what's interesting too, Kevin, is you think about your average Uber driver. A lot of people drive Uber because they want to either A, work for themselves, B, they didn't like working in a corporate environment. But the company has been fairly public, I believe, since the beginning, that once they have the ability to have self-driving cars, that's it. They're going to get rid of all the human employees. And then all those people that, they're doing Uber as kind of their last option. What do all those Americans do once Uber can drive itself?
Yeah. On the optimistic side, but I'd pick up on that theme. The rush to build these data centers has actually reinvigorated and revived a lot of really. I mean, I'm just using this word sparingly. Backwaters in America, North Dakota areas, which were never saw anything of the Industrial Revolution or were swept aside, you know, and became part of the Rust Belt. That would be the Midwest. Like they're moving in with these. Amazon, for example, has created thousands of jobs in some of these areas, and home prices are quadrupled because they've loads of the things that they actually want: water, land, and a labor force hungry to get back to work. But the longer term trend is, will we have real jobs for humans and for Americans? Big question mark.
yeah, I think this is something I've been thinking about. I think the issue right now with society is that we don't have a layer above, the business people who think in terms of what's good for society as a whole. Like right now, the incredibly wealthy, they're pretty much in control of, not only economics, but of politics. So they're guiding the nation in a fashion that's good for their individual companies. Okay, we're bringing in robotics, so on and so forth, and it's going to be incredibly profitable in the short term for them. But in a larger perspective, if nobody has jobs in the long term, then the company's going to blow up because nobody can buy what they're producing. So, that kind of combined with these golden parachutes that some of these CEOs have is like get as much short-term profits as we can and then just bail out. And I think the lack of larger oversight of what's good for society as a whole versus just, the wealthy using their money to buy politicians. I think that's like the real issue. But how do you have a board or something that is able to oversee these incredibly powerful, players? I think that's the real question.
Yeah, I don't think the American economy, the Western world, is properly set up to transition to this very unknown new world, which could be a very dark place or could take us into very dark places. And the interesting fact is that while there's a lot of the middle class hollowed out and the poor are poorer, and there's a widening income inequality gap, there's a lot of Americans doing extremely well on the back of the stock market, S&P up 15, 16% or whatever this year. And that is, that it's generating this whole wealth effect, if you will. So as the stock market keeps rising, and it has been rising, it was pullbacks and that, but it's hit new records. These lucky investors, if you will, or these smart investors, pick and choose your word, are spending on luxury goods, dining out, vacations, even buying homes. But it has bypassed a huge section of the American public. And I just want to make a note again that I'm free enterprise, and I don't want to see some kind of a radical socialist party overthrow, what we have. But we do have to. We need to transition better for what we're coming up to, and we need people coming out with documents to get us thinking about it, and responsible leaders who will come up with a platform that addresses these issues, not out of self-interest, but for the greater good.
Yep. So, I think, Brian, were you about to say something?
No, go ahead, Kev.
Okay. Yeah. I think if you kind of study history, the period of time that we're in, this is usually a lot of these factors precede revolutions where, the rich, they have this extraordinary amount of wealth. Everybody else, they don't have anything. But also America is an incredibly armed nation. So I think, these power players, they have to think on a deeper level. Like, okay, on paper, I have a lot of this, money and resources, but what does it really mean if everybody around me is starving, angry, and armed? Like, does this money mean anything if they're going to come after me for it? And I guess, that's why maybe some of the rich have already moved out of the country on islands where people can't access. But
Well, that's a good point, Kevin, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, defending the US dollar and propping it up, make sure we don't lose a reserve status, because once we lose that, all these billionaires will find their spending power has tanked. They won't be able to buy their islands overseas or their jet planes or anything, because the dollar will have lost so much value. It'll be a currency that's the talk of the town, but a joke.
Right. For that reason, do you think that's why so many people have gold and are buying gold presently?
I do. That's what the analysts are saying, that's why there's a rush to
Okay.
gold. Yeah, yeah. And that's why earlier we had the crypto phenomena, because there was great fears about the US dollar as a fiat currency. And there still should be. Anybody who analyzes this stuff should be worried. Like somebody today, was Maria Bartiromo, who I admire as a TV person and as somebody who thinks about these issues. She's a big supporter of Donald Trump. I guess on his thinking, but Trump is talking about giving is it a $2,000? You may have to correct me. I know he's talking
Yeah.
about giving a 10,000 to the traffic folks that stay on the job at the airports. 2,000 dividend, I guess, from the tariffs for each person, I presume. She was saying she would much prefer that to be, paid to pay down the national debt, which to me probably makes a lot more sense. Just get it down below the 30 trillion mark, and then we'd all sweat a lot less. And even long-term rates would start to come back, because you talk about the Fed controlling interest rates. Yeah, they do the short rate, but the long rate it's the bond markets, the investors. If money becomes riskier, they're going to push those rates higher, So get your debt down, get your national debt down.
So do you believe like Trump or anyone is actually going to be able to, do the difficult things in order to get the debt down and get the country on track? Because I think the problem with politics now is like it's kind of a game of musical chairs. Like the party, they're not going to do the hard things because their party is going to get creamed the next election. Like let's just say we have austerity measures to get the debt down and so on and so forth, and people are they're struggling, so they're going to vote for the party that says, hey, we're going to give you free stuff, even if that's wrecking the country, even if that's contributing to the national debt. So I think it's like we're kind of in that ping pong of nobody's doing what it takes to fix the real problem.
Yeah, I don't know, Kevin. I mean, I am, I'm a U.S. citizen, but I immigrated. Immigrated to America, so I have different perspectives, U.S. and European. But if you look through American history and world history, it's interesting and maybe surprising by today's standards that we were prepared to make those economic sacrifices at the time of the Second World War, right? We bought government bonds to support the war effort. We had victory gardens. Food was scarce, but people took it on the chin. There was less of an entitlement mentality, and we've never had it by many measures so good. We have Everybody has plumbing, everybody has electric heating, 4 TVs, 1, 2 cars, beautiful clothes, go out to dine. That might be the average person, And I'm not trying to, I do think we have to take care of our neediest. We have a great obligation to make sure everybody is fed. That's a great way to do it through public charities and so on. The government steps in when public charities can't do it. But, overall, it's a much better country if you add up all we have now. But there's nobody ready to make the sacrifice. If Trump went on the air tomorrow morning, my dear fellow Americans, I've done the math and I have a chart here. If we all give up 5,000 this year, for the next 2 years, we'll have our national debt down to 27.5. Our interest rates will shrink in long term, and we'll be a much more prosperous. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to chip in. We all wanted the easy way. It's we want to bail out something. It's crazy.
It's the American way. Push the easy button.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're gonna keep on kicking the can down the road until they have to pay the piper, and then that's when it's extreme because the problem is compounding. Is like you have these credit cards, you keep getting new ones until the credit runs out, and then what do you do?
Yeah. Well, we know the credit card debt over $1 trillion, student debt over $1 trillion. Now there's a big problem in the auto loan sector. There's a lot of a rise in the number of people who are 90 days behind in their payments, and they're saying that could be a kind of a subprime crisis because they've been selling cars to folks who have very sketchy credit.
Yeah. Hey, you know that there's a problem when you can go to like Chipotle or even a grocery store and finance a burrito. Like,
yeah. Well, this 50-year home mortgage that takes the cookie, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. If I got that, well, I'd be like 90 by the time I pay my house off.
Yeah, it's amazing. But again, as we said earlier, the recent bout of elections, which dumbfounded even Donald Trump, he says, "Wow," he sounded really surprised, by the outcome. But by some accounts, it was the election was about affordability. You know, but again, how much of the affordability should be on the shoulders of people? How much it should be about personal responsibility and government commitments and the broader economic outlook. You can't have it every way. We can't all be bailed out.
Right.
Yeah, who's gonna keep who's gonna help give us financing to pay that national debt? We're gonna just print more money. If we print more money, here comes inflation. So
Yep.
That's the thing, and so when they do the bailouts, they're bailing out the millionaires, the billionaires. What about the working class? What about what's left of the middle class? Are they being bailed out? No, it's always these companies. So I don't know what the solution is there. Certainly I believe in capitalism. I think it's the best system that we have so far. But I see why people are starting to slowly move, especially the younger generation. They're saying, hey, this socialism stuff doesn't look so bad. Maybe we should give that a shot. But the only reason they're saying that is because the economy is such in shambles. A lot of people graduating from high school, going into college, graduating college, into the workforce, and there's just no jobs for them because they're all entry level. And kind of what I was telling Kev earlier, the entry level job is now largely being done by AI. So how do these green people get jobs when that's going on?
Yeah, that's a great point, Brian. And I share your sentiment. We don't want socialism. We don't want communism. But there's different flavors of capitalism. It's not a popular word among some free enterprise people. They don't use that in discussions. Interestingly enough, I spoke to an economist who's very pro business, but he said that's a derogatory term coined by Karl Marx, but he prefers free enterprise. But whatever, we're kind of talking about the same thing here. But there's crony capitalism. There's unbridled capitalism. I guess the question is, are there limits to capitalism? Because if there's no limits, you can devour the weakest among us.
yeah, I believe well-regulated capitalism is probably the best solution. But now there's no regulations; it's just free for all.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, we're 1 year into the Trump presidency, in or around, and we'll see where the next year takes us. He's eternally optimistic. He said 17 trillion in investments into America. Hope he's right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's hopefully we'll still be here so we can do the next show.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, did you want to leave our audience with any closing thoughts?
No, I've enjoyed this stimulating discussion. I think we'll be picking up on these themes going forward. I think we're just at the cusp of the AI shakeout. I think in 2 or 3 months, if we regroup, we'll have new chapters in this story, Brian and Kevin, and I'd love to discuss them with you then.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll definitely get your schedule back, and if nuclear war doesn't take us out.
Oh gosh!
If we're all still here,
to the bunker.
We're all still here, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next time.